Hey everyone, I'm so glad you've joined us for Resilience RX. I'm Jacob Nordby. I'm the co-founder of Institute for Creative Living, and it's just such a great pleasure to invite you into this weekend with me. I, as I was sitting with what's been turning in the world lately and observing how much just sort of turmoil there is in general, and those of us in the US, we tend to think that it's just us, but I have friends and people from around the world, and outside the American bubble, there is so much change. That seems to be the one constant is there is so much change, and change always brings up uncertainty. And uncertainty, as we're going to look at today, affects our nervous systems really dramatically, and it often pushes us into fight or flight, sometimes into freeze. We end up be making choices that are not founded in our greatest wisdom. And as a result, then we run around feeling kind of scared and freaked out most of the time. And again, this is agnostic of your political views, your financial state, situation, anything like that. The bottom line is, as humans, we crave certainty so much. And when things feel uncertain, if we can't see the path ahead clearly, we often then get into these anxious feelings. And that is completely normal. So let me refer to my notes for just a moment here. Oh, one thing I was going to ask you to do before we get started here is do a quick check-in. Earlier, I asked where you are located, but let's just take a breath with me and let your attention come inward into your body self. Do a quick scan and give yourself a rating on how you're feeling right now. One would be, oh my God, I can't believe I'm sitting upright. I'm really freaked out and tense. And 10 would be, I am basically on acid. I'm so happy and feeling so good. So yeah, just use the chat feature. We'll be using this throughout today and the rest of this to interact. And of course, later I'll have some sharing where you can raise your hand and actually share with your voice. Okay, 9.78, Toby. Fantastic. 6, 8, maybe 7, 6, 5, 5. Okay, wonderful. I'm really happy to see so many of us at, above half or above the line. But one of the reasons I do this is to reinforce the truth that however you arrive is welcome here. You do not have to show up with, super blissful feelings, and you don't have to be a certain way. And I think it's really important, especially as we are leaning into some of these practices. It's important to realize that simply checking in and being aware of how we're currently feeling is one of the first spots. Like, okay, how am I feeling right now? And then how would I love to feel? And learning that we can use some of these tools and practices to affect our state, right? Is such a crucial thing. And, one thing I also wanted to say is thank you. Thank you for being here. Um, if I had my way, we'd have 10,000 people on this session, on these sessions, because I know that the more of us who find our inner sanity, our groundedness, our peace, the more of us who are in that space, the better the world gets. Um, Having said that, I'm also aware that everything going on in the world right now is incredibly distracting. It's really hard for us sometimes to focus and to look away from things that are causing us uncertainty, distress, etc. And so I just want to commend you, say thank you for being one of the relatively few out there in this world who go, hang on, I know I need to tap into my deeper resilience, into my inner wisdom. I know I need that. And then you actually showed up for it. So thanks for being here. And if you are catching this on the replay, thank you also. I know not everyone can attend live sessions, but as we show up to these things and as we take in the information, and more than just take in the information, um, we want to embody it. We want to take it home. Otherwise, it's just like listening to a podcast or reading a book. And podcasts and books can sometimes be life-changing. But if we're just letting it flow through our thought and not actually taking it into our experience and learning how to practice it, it's not going to make much change. Um, so why this program? I think I touched on it a minute ago. Just, I'm one of those highly sensitive people, and I often pick up vibes that are not always mine. How many of you, just using chat, how many of you would self-identify as being highly sensitive in some way? Like you just know that you pick up a lot from people around you, from the environment, from okay, yes, lots of yeses, definitely. Oh, definitely, that's me. Okay, hypersensitive and vigilant. Okay, so right, so you're in the right place because many of us who experience that often don't realize why we're feeling so burdened or turned upside down, even if the details of our life are actually in pretty good shape. If you add additional stressors inside of your life to what's going on in the collective, often that can set up this sense of being um, overwhelmed, of being frozen, of being unable to move forward, right? I'm seeing some of your heads nod. Yeah. So really what this is about today and tomorrow is taking a moment and taking a break and retreating. I wish we could be doing this in person, because that's a whole different energy, but I love that we're here doing it like this. Usually, when I open a session like this, I'll do some kind of a guided meditation visualization. I'm going to hold that to the very end today, and I have a reason for that. One thing that I want to have you do though is notice what happens when you think about, allow yourself, go ahead and allow yourself, this is an exercise, go ahead and allow yourself to think about something that's been top level for you lately that causes, it causes that kind of wave of anxiety when you think about it. Um, Go ahead and just think about something like that. You don't have to write what it is, but how does it feel in your body when you turn your attention towards something that is just an automatic trigger that's going to cause a sense of anxiety? How does that feel in your body, and where is it? Do you notice that, where it's going on? Tension in my neck and back. Anybody notice that your breath gets shallow? My gut, says Pamela. Right. Um, Anybody else? Feel my shoulders, neck, and throat tighten. I begin to sweat. Right. Deep, deep within my heart. Okay, good. Vibration in my body, heart rate increases. Right. So what I want you to do is just take a moment and go ahead and let yourself feel that. Let yourself feel that. Left hip and back, says Leslie. Breathing issues. Forget to breathe or don't breathe enough. Yes. Throat, tummy hurt. Okay. Let yourself go ahead and feel that. And what I want you to do is pull out your journal or notebook and just write down, I'm not bad or weak for feeling this way. In our culture, we are often taught to front with strength, confidence, decisiveness, all those things, boldness. It's good to know how to front with those things as we need to. It's also really important, though, when we give ourselves private moments, it's important to be able to really tell the truth about how we're feeling. We often feel guilt when we're in the face of a lot of uncertainty and change. We feel guilt over feeling weak or frightened or anxious or whatever the word you might use for it is, depressed, tightened up. Um, Write down the words, I'm not bad or weak for feeling this way. Just write that down for a moment. Let yourself breathe that. And I'd love, as you repeat those words in your mind and write them down on paper, I'm not bad or weak for feeling this way. I would love for you to notice how it feels for you to give yourself that kind of grace, that little bit of tolerance. Just write it into chat. How does it feel to acknowledge that feeling and also then take away any sense of judgment that you should or shouldn't be feeling it that way? Breathing easier, forgiving, right. Brings a lightness. Good. Yawning, says Susan. Yawning is often an activity of our body automatically releasing something. I love that, Susan. My body melts, calming. Okay, good. Self-compassion, freeing. Right. Perfectly flawed human. Right. By the way, just pause for a moment. Thank you so much for so early on engaging in this way. This really changes how these things, the value of these sessions when you engage this way. So thank you for being so quick with that. Kathy says, I can allow the tension and it fades. Okay, less stressed and throat clearing. All right, thank you for this. What you're noticing there is you're able to direct your attention. So I asked you to bring in a thought, and then I asked you to let yourself feel it, not turn away from it. And then I asked you to actually change your state about it, right? And so we're going to be going through some of these practices today that allow you to notice that you have influence. You have influence over how you think and feel. And when I said influence, notice it's a subtle difference between that word and control. Control indicates I can make something happen exactly as I want it to happen. I think very little in our life is actually under our control. We give ourselves that illusion. We tell ourselves that we should be in control, and that creates a lot of anxiety on its own because many things are outside of our control. And that's actually why this program, because resilience. Actually, before I give you the my definition of resilience, what when you hear the word resilience, what comes to mind? What are a couple of words that come to mind? Use chat, please. When you think of resilience, what does that mean to you? Strength, says Pamela, right? Fortitude, unstoppable, indestructible, keep moving forward, ability to bounce back, getting back up and over, powerful, all the above, courage. Think of trees flexing in a storm wind. Yes. Pardon me. Every it's like we're creating this word cloud right now. Every one of you used a valid part of that word cloud. So yeah, all of these things are encompassed in this idea of resilience. Resilience is you've already said it. The resilience is the ability to recover or bounce back from stressful or traumatic experiences, right? Resilience keeps us curious and flexible, and it helps us access our inner and our external resources. In just a minute, we're going to be looking at a couple of charts that show us the nervous system, and we're going to notice that when we allow ourselves to get ramped up too high into anxiety, into fight or flight or freeze, we actually begin to develop psychological tunnel vision and even physical tunnel vision. If you're in physical danger, your brain begins to allocate all of its resources to what's needed in the moment, which means we develop tunnel vision. We begin to not notice what all is going on around us, except for what we can see through those tunnels. Psychologically, it's true as well. We begin to focus on the negative, on the things that are weakening us, that are pulling us apart. And that is a really natural response. I don't want any of us to like shame ourselves for having that. However, that also keeps us out of our most resourceful states. And so this program this weekend is meant to help you come back into your body, to have some practices that are so simple, like you don't need an advanced degree in meditation or neuroscience or herbology or anything like that to take these things home with you and begin to actually use them on a daily basis and notice how they change your experience of life, how they give you a sense of being able to, like Susan just mentioned, the trees blowing in the wind. You can bend without breaking. You can face difficulties um, without being shattered by them. And you'll actually begin to notice how you're not just gaining strength through them, but you're gaining wisdom. You're gaining more clarity. You're gaining the ability to actually be of service and help to others around you. So resilience keeps us curious and flexible, helps us access our resources. A lack of resilience makes every day difficult or maybe even impossible feeling. How many of you have ever experienced the insurmountable task syndrome? Okay, I'm seeing some hands come up. Insurmountable task. It's like that very simple thing that on usual days you don't even have to think about. It's automatic, like checking your email, brushing your teeth, whatever it might be. But when you're really stressed out, even the simplest things can feel overwhelming or completely insurmountable. Anybody relate to that? I'm seeing some yeses coming in. Leslie, I was born into uncertainty and lived there for half my life. I mean, Leslie, I'm so glad you brought that up. Often we internalize beliefs about ourselves and the world before we even know our own name. We are picking up like in that early infant state, our brainwave state is in the hypnagogic. It's in the deltic, delta brainwave state. So we're actually these super learning organisms. We're just taking in all of the data, but we don't have a prefrontal cortex developed to the point where we can distinguish between information or experiences that are true for us or be able to say, oh, that's not valid for me. So we often then begin to internalize these beliefs, these core beliefs, before we even know our own name, that I'm not safe here, I don't belong, I'll be rejected or abandoned, I'm not lovable, I'm not good enough, right? All those things. That when that happens, we then form a framework, a lens, or what Robert Anton Wilson would call a reality tunnel. We form these perspectives then about ourselves and the world that very deeply shape our behaviors. Take this for a moment. Your beliefs, what you believe to be true, and often unconsciously believe to be true about yourself and the world, that affects your imagination. So it affects how you can even imagine what the next step might be. So if you come into your day and you have these deep beliefs, I'm not safe here, the world's not a safe place, I'm not safe, I don't belong here, all those things, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough. When you have those deep core beliefs, then that colors the lens through which you're seeing everything. And so then as your imagination kicks in, it begins to tell stories about what's next, about reality, about yourself, about what's possible, that affects your feelings, right? And your feelings then affect the stories you're telling, both your internal stories and the ones you're telling. Let me just ask you this. Let's say that you had something come up that really scared you. Maybe your kid didn't come home from school right away, and it was an hour and you couldn't get a hold of them. They didn't answer their texts. Use chat for just a moment. When I just painted that little scenario, what does your mind automatically begin to paint pictures of for you? Worst case, project worst case scenario, right? You begin to see them in a ditch with a car rolled upside down, right? My child's been kidnapped. I need to hide from the world, anxiety and stress, right? So now we just activated our nervous system. We're into that fight. We start getting to that fight or flight. We begin to paint the worst case scenario. And then how does those feelings then generate a lot of words? You've been telling them, these are the feelings of anxiety, frantic thoughts, feeling frozen, right? It might be a health issue. It might be a letter in your mailbox from the IRS, whatever it is that automatically spikes your anxiety. That's what we're talking about here, right? Yeah, Joanne, lost, not supported, pre-grief sets in. Yes, we actually begin to grieve before a thing happens, angry and overreactive, feeling helpless. All right. How would you like to know that you can take that, hold it, not suppress it or deny it, because that never helps, but also hold it and then go, okay, I can actually step back from that thought, that chain of events, which I'm now creating a whole scenario. Let's just keep with that for a moment. Let's say the kid comes home 2 hours late. You've already been telling the story. You've created a 4K movie in your mind that's affected your nervous system, your neurochemicals. You've created this whole scene where they were in terrible distress, maybe being injured or kidnapped. Then they pop in the door, hey, mom or dad, and what's the next word that often comes out of your mouth, right? What happens? You begin to behave as if that whole story were true. Oh my God, where have you been? I can't believe. Yeah, it turns to rage, says Susan. Right. We automatically go into the behavior as if that whole story were true. Now, that's an incredibly natural experience. I've had that experience with my kids. I'm sure most of you have. Um, oh my God, what just happened? Now I feel so angry. I feel angry that you have made me feel so afraid. How dare you? Where have you been? Oh, I'm sorry, Mom. My phone died. The band teacher said we had to stay an extra hour or two to practice, and I just thought everything would be okay. I thought you were at work and wouldn't matter. Something completely benign, right? Something completely reasonable, but this created this whole scenario as if the tragedy had been true. Sometimes tragedies happen. We can't hide from that. It's not like you can just think your way around or out of every situation that causes a stress. However, we create so many more tragedies than we need to. And when we do that, we begin to create a more tragic, painful, depressing, distressing overall experience of life. So what we're looking at today is meant to help us actually move around that and actually have more resources. How many of you have, read like or watched World War II or Vietnam movies or stories or something like that? And there's people in the midst of these crises who just have mental clarity. They have the poise. They have the ability to pause. And in the military services, they have this acronym. It's called the OODA loop. Orient. Oh my God, I'm going to forget the second one. Decide and then act. Basically, it's that moment of pause that says, I get to create some space between the stimulus, whatever is happening, and my response or reaction to it. The greater that space, the more your power to choose consciously and to make really good decisions. Like this is where heroic action happens, is in that space between stimulus and response. I'm not talking about heroic as in, like riding in a white horse, but it's like the right action. It's the right action at the right moment, and everyone else is losing their minds, right? How many of you would agree that right now we need a lot more people who know how to take that pause and create right action in our lives? All of our heads are nodding. Okay, good. All right. So we've talked about that state of freeze. Even the simplest things begin to feel far too big to handle. Also, when we're in that state, everything feels impossible, and even people who have well-meaning desires to help us or offer solution, that can feel like attacks, right? We're like, I can't even let a good idea in right now. Thanks for everything, but please shut up because that is not helpful. So, here's what I know. Here's what I know. We are all dealing with extreme degrees of change and uncertainty. Let's take politics out of it. Let's take a lot of other factors, just our experience of life. Most of us here are old enough to remember a time before cell phones, right? Oh, yeah, Kathy. Observe, orient, decide, act. Thank you. And also Sandra. I knew someone else would have that acronym at the top of their mind. Yeah. Uh, what was my question? Okay, so we're talking about this collective uncertainty. How many of you were born and had and came into adulthood before cell phones were a thing? Right. I remember I resisted. Toby, I was still here in Boise before I moved down to Austin, Texas for a few years, and I resisted buying a smartphone with everything I was. Our friend Thane Rigby, when I came back from Austin, Texas, he showed up at my doorstep and handed me an iPhone 4, and he said, "Buddy, you got to have this thing." I'm like, "Oh my God, this is a slippery slope," and it has been. But the fact is, the internet, the rise of mobile devices, all the things that we've become just part of the landscape of life now were completely foreign. So we actually had to adapt very, very quickly. Those of us who are in Gen X and have children, our kids, Gen Zers, they were born on that wave, but we were born before that big wave happened. So when you look at the rate of change that's happened, even inside of our adulthoods, not even just inside of our lives, the rate of change, the number of things we've had to learn how to use, how to interact with, how to assimilate into our lives, just that by itself is like several lifetimes worth of change previous. So our great grandparents or great great grandparents, during their lifespan, there would be definitely be change, but it was going to be very incremental. We have actually experienced entire lifetimes worth of cycles of change in our lives so far, and all of us know that that is not slowing down. Just that by itself creates a state of constant uncertainty and therefore a state of constant latent anxiety. And that's even if you're completely excited about all the change that's happening, right? So that's part of what I want us to really understand about how our brains work, how our nervous systems work, and give ourselves grace for realizing that if we're walking around feeling anxious or half crazy a lot of the time, it's simply part of assimilating, like absorbing, metabolizing change that our systems really, our psyches really aren't meant to handle that much that quickly, right? So, what happens when we deal with long-term anxiety like that? And again, I don't want to paint it as some kind of a bad thing. It's, or like, oh my God, I'm so anxious. Like, no, it's actually part of the experience of modern life is latent anxiety. And then times when, we have even more visible change or turmoil, that latent anxiety spikes above the surface. And when that happens, we begin to have our resiliency tanks drained. We begin to act out of character. We often lose touch with our values and we start to lash out, curl up, take on seriously unproductive behaviors. So, my idea as we go through this program together is that we take things home, not just think about them, not just absorb them through a Zoom session, but actually begin to practice them. So, as we go through these things this weekend, what I'd love for you to do is note some things and create your own recipe book. Maybe it's a single herb that Susan will talk about later today, or maybe it's a single breath work cycle that Paul will show us tomorrow. Whatever it might be, make your own recipe book, make your own cookbook, and go, okay, though that one thing I'm going to practice, I'm going to try that. I'm going to learn how to use that in my life. Because if you do that, you'll get more value from this weekend than someone who can actually recite back the entire presentation but does not embody or use any of it themselves. All right. So, what we're sharing here, these are experiences you can give yourself at will. You can actually use them at will. Many of them are things you can do in unusual settings, such as when you're at the stoplight or in a meeting. It does not have to be anything with a special meditation pillow, special scents, anything like that. Many of these things are relatively invisible to those around you, but you can learn that you can take control of your mental and your nervous system states and create a much more balanced, solid, peaceful way of moving forward. So, what I'm asking you to do is actually to commit to and work to establish a virtuous cycle, right? So a vicious cycle is that downward spiral of fear, of unresourcefulness, of depression, of feeling unable to do things, the overwhelming task, all of that. Vicious cycles don't take any effort. And I really hope you'll get this. A virtuous cycle takes some effort because it's like climbing stairs, a spiral staircase upward. So it actually takes work to climb stairs. As I've been working with these practices in my own life so often, I was sharing with my brother a couple of days ago, there are days when getting up, using my journaling practices, using some of my visualization or meditation practices, that is the last thing I want to do. I don't feel like it. I feel like doom scrolling. I feel like doing a lot of unproductive things. But when I pause and go, oh, that's the same way I often feel when I go to the gym or to yoga class or ready to take a hike. My those parts of me that don't want to exert effort will resist it. But that's why it's a workout, right? So it is work to establish a virtuous cycle. And that's what I'm inviting you into this weekend is pick the things that really feel like, oh, I know that will help me. And then begin to practice them every day because it has this accruing effect and it's incremental. You know, you begin meditating one day. It might take 3 weeks for you to notice, oh, I'm actually walking around with a more peaceful state of mind. I'm actually making better decisions. My relationships are improving. Very similar to exercise or yoga. The first few sessions are going to feel really hard and you're going to be sore and you're going to be mad at yourself for ever saying you would do it, right? So let's commit together to create virtuous cycles. And here's why. Sometimes it can feel a little selfish to do what we call self-care. And self-care is often not bubble baths and chocolate cake and champagne, even though that can be part of it. But often self-care requires some work, some very small disciplines, right? All right. How many of you here, it takes work and one of your inner voices says, a hug, I'm just so tired right now? How many of you feel you're hearing me say it's going to take some work and you're going, oh my God, I'm just so tired right now. Use chat for a moment if you would. Um, yeah, says Sarah. Yes. Okay. Some yeses coming in. Yeah. Often we feel tired. The work commit makes me balk. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So tired, so overwhelmed. Don't ask me to do another thing. I'm ready for the change. Tired, but I don't feel like I have a choice because my life depends upon it. Okay. This is excellent. Thank you. Like my idea of putting words in your mouth is so much inferior to your actual words. This is perfect. All right. What I want you to do now is pause and give those inner voices a little space to speak. That voice that says, "Oh, I'm just so tired right now." Um, what I've found is that our inner selves are very like intelligent toddlers. So if you've ever raised a toddler, you know that telling that toddler to be quiet isn't a long-term solution. They're going to say, mommy, daddy, I need a drink. I need to go potty. It's going to get louder and more repetitious until something finally breaks, until they get your attention, right? So, what we want to do right now is just take a moment and give that inner toddler, that inner intelligent child, a space to speak without being shamed. And without being said, we don't have time for that right now. You can't be tired. Let's go ahead and just for a moment give that inner self a little bit of room. So grab your notebook, make a list of things in your life that make you feel tired right now, or make you feel angry or depressed, or make you feel overwhelmed, whatever word you want to use. But those things that just make you feel so tired. All right, we're going to take 2 minutes. Don't overthink this. Just write down as many things you can think of that follow the phrase, I'm so tired of, or you might use blank makes me feel tired, depressed, and angry. All right, go ahead and write. I'm going to use a timer for 2 minutes, and then we'll have a little bit of sharing. My cell phone falling there was your 1 minute reminder. About 1 minute left. And come on back. All right. How did it feel to give yourself permission to whine a little bit? I use that word whine intentionally. Most of us are so hard on ourselves. We feel like we should be stronger, braver, more courageous, all that than we often feel. And we often interpret the intention given to what is distressing us as whining. I want you to tune in and go, oh, when I let myself just whine a little bit on paper, how did that feel? How did that feel for you? Go ahead. Nice venting, says Alice. Yeah. What else? I'm sitting here holding my breath, watching chat. A little guilty, honestly. Yeah, Toby, thank you. Exactly. A little guilty. We often don't give ourselves much space for this. So hard to do because I'm so blessed in many ways. Right, Sarah. Frustration. Okay. Interesting, Paul. Honest. So Paul, I'm curious. If you want to just turn your mic on for a minute, if you don't mind? Tell me a little bit more about the frustration. Looks like you're not alone in that.
Um, so for me, the frustration speaks to the fact that I even have to be tired
Mm,
of whatever it is that I'm tired of, you know, like
mm-hmm,
excuses is makes me really tired. Not just my
mm,
excuses, but the people I work with on a daily basis always have something, some reason they can't do, and they can't, you know, they just fall into that story you talk about, you talked
right.
about earlier. So yeah, and then saw somebody say something about frustration, Leslie, and angry. Then the anger comes in after the frustration. You know,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
that's where I'm at with that.
No, I really thank you for sharing that, Paul. That actually wasn't one that I expected, and then now I'm seeing it, a bunch of these coming in that way. And as
You
I
know me better than that, Jacob.
Well, no, just not that you shouldn't have that. It just honestly, frustration wasn't one of the things that was coming up for me as I was thinking about what I might see. So Maria says all of the above. No, thank you for giving voice to that. And Toby, I appreciated what you said earlier, a little guilty. I appreciate all of your comments here, a little guilty. And then there's several of you, so hard to do because I'm blessed in so many ways. So there's this comparison thing. It's like, what right do I have to be allowing myself to think and feel these ways because I'm so blessed. So many other people have it harder than me, right? Wow, this is really good. I appreciate it. Confirmed how fragile my nervous system is and how easily I get knocked off balance. Yeah, Tracy. Wow. A sense I'm already trying so hard. Yeah, Susan. Like it's already such an effort to get up and move the things around that I need to do all day long before I go back to bed. Can I really, you want to finish that statement, Susan? I was getting ready to put words in your mouth.
Well, I think it's just the frustration. Again, Paul, I think frustration is such a great word. The sense of like, but I'm already doing all of these things. I've learned all of these things. I'm trying so hard, and oh
Mm-hmm,
my God, look at the world.
mm-hmm,
Like, oh, I think there's a loneliness there
mm-hmm.
that's a little hard to find the right language to
Yeah,
describe.
yeah, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I'm loving this, and I love that as you're sharing with each other, that you're noticing you're not alone. The loneliness piece. You're noticing that I'm not the only one feeling this. I'm not the only one who feels guilty about feeling it, right? Um, Now, I want you to look back at that list because we're going to go through some visuals in just a moment to help us understand what's going inside of our mind and nervous system when these things are there. One thing we know from our friend Dr. Carl Jung is what you what is what you resist persists, right? So if we're resisting allowing ourselves to think and feel those things because they feel unworthy, they feel weak, they feel whatever the thing is around that, if we resist feeling them and acknowledging them, they don't go away. It's like that toddler. They keep persisting. They keep being there until we pay attention to them. Now, we don't have to pay attention to them in a wallowing way or in a way that removes our agency, our power. And by the way, isn't that a big part of the weariness right now is feeling like you don't have real agency, the real ability to affect the outcomes, you can't really control what's going on. In fact, that leads us to our next thing. I want you to look back at your list. How many of the things on your list do you have direct influence over? Like you know that you can, if you did enough things, you could change those things. Um, how many of the things on the list do you look at and go, oh, wow, I really have very little control or influence over that thing, but it's still making me tired. It's still making me feel exhausted and overwhelmed, or whatever that word might be for you. Um, that's the real, Leslie says, I feel a tremendous shift of people and energies. That's the real issue of not having control. Yeah, when we feel like we have very little influence over our circumstances, over what's coming next, um, that often brings up a lot of weariness. All right. So if a lot of those things, look at the list real quick and just use chat. How many of the things on your list are outside of your actual control? You can't make a decision and take action and do something about it. Kathy says most of them. Yeah. Right. Who else? Who else wants to be honest about this? All but one, sure. All but one, most of them. The best lack, oh yeah, Susan. Um, about half. Okay. And again, regardless of whether it was a lot or a few or none or whatever, you didn't fail some sort of psychological, spiritual pop quiz. You didn't fail the test. We're going to look how we can assess where we are allocating our resources, right? When you think of your buckets of energy that you have for things, if most of those buckets are being poured onto situations over which you have very little control, what happens to you? What happens when you pour most of your energy and resources into things you really can't influence at all? Depleted. Yeah. You get tired. That's exhausting. Want to shut down. You make yourself sick. I feel like a lot of you are psychologists. I get even more tired and give up. Yes. Frustrated. Feel impotent, right? You feel like you don't have the potency, the ability to change the situation. Worrying about the things out there takes all the energy I could use to actually change what I can. Exactly. And this is simple. We know this, but part of why I wanted to bring it into Resilience RX is because this is where we begin to, Carl Jung once said, until we bring what's unconscious to consciousness to the surface, it will control your life and you will call it fate. Hello, Crack Weasel. For those of you who haven't met this person, this is the cat named Crack Weasel, and he always likes to join Zoom sessions. So what we are doing by drawing our attention to these things that make us feel overwhelmed, impotent, unable to move forward, all of that, by allowing ourselves to look at them, this is not wallowing. It's not actually giving them energy or power. It's actually telling us that we have a conscious choice. We have the ability to redirect our resources. So if most of your energetic buckets are being used on things you can't control, what I want to do for the rest of this program today and throughout this weekend is give you some more practices that will widen that space between stimulus and response. It will give you a sense of not being too small to handle what's going on in your life or in the world, right? Um, a big part of resilience is redirecting our energy into the areas we can influence rather than wasting all this energies on things we can't. All right, let's have a look at a couple of visuals. I like visuals. I don't like too many of them, but I like some visuals. All right. I'm sure most of you are familiar with, aware that we have biases that are in our operating systems. We have these minds, and we often think we are so original, like we are the only ones who have particular wiring. The fact is, almost all of us are operating with numerous cognitive biases and if you think of a bias as part of the operating system of our brains, like when you install software and then you eventually update the software, um, that's what operates that machinery. Well, our minds and what we believe to be true, as we talked about earlier, what we believe to be true, um, especially if it's unconscious, especially if it's down deeper than what we can normally even spot when we're going through our days, we don't realize that we have these biases. And one of them is a negativity bias. Most of us are aware that during really primitive human times, this served us really well because the people, the animals, the ones who could look forward and anticipate the risks, the danger, and avoid them, those were the ones that survived, right? But we still have that. So it tends to be that we go out looking for, kind of like we did that little thought exercise earlier, talking about, if your kid came home from school late and what we automatically do, we automatically go toward this. We have a bias toward looking for the risk, the downside, the disappointment, the failure, the pain, the rejection, right? Now, when you combine that with a confirmation bias, this is a tendency to seek out, interpret, and remember information that confirms one's existing beliefs or expectations. So, if you combine a negativity bias with a confirmation bias, don't do it right this minute, but if you were to pick up your phone and open up your favorite social media app, let's say Facebook or Instagram or Threads, start scrolling, what would you automatically pick up on? Most likely your mind would automatically go toward negative stories, negative information that also confirms what you believe to be true. That's why it's called a bias. And that's why it's a bit of work to step outside of that bias and go, okay, this is where the river of thought normally goes. Let's redirect that river of thought. It might require digging a ditch. So we're actually talking about neuroplasticity, the ability to change the way we use this machinery called our brains, right? Neuroplasticity is the ability to actually change. And it's work because we've been carving these grooves, these ditches, these canals, these rivers of thought. We've been carving them since before we even knew our own names. So it takes work to redirect the flow of thought. And that's really what we're talking about here today is the ability to be aware of, hey, I have a confirmation bias. I'm going to go out and look for things that reinforce what I believe to be true. If what I believe to be true is negative or scary, then I'm likely to find more and more information that also puts me in that state. I'm looking at some chat here. Um, yes. All right, let's look at the next one here. I want you to actually draw this real quick in your notebook or journal. Draw two circles, one big one and one inner circle. And I want you to look at the list that you made earlier, the things that make you feel tired or angry or whatever, your whining list. I want you to look at that list and I want you to, inside the two circles, begin putting the things, putting those items in their proper circle. Is this within my own arm's reach? So if you reach your arms out and think about, oh, this is what I can influence and this is what I can't, write the things down that are within your own arm's reach. Even if you don't want to do them, you don't know how you have the energy, the time, or the money to do them, but you know that they are things you can influence. They aren't outside of your influence. Write those within that circle, my arm's reach, and then write everything else on the outside of that. I'm going to set a timer for 2 minutes. I'll go ahead and take this off for a moment. Set a timer for 2 minutes and go ahead and reassign those items to their proper circle. About 1 minute. All right, come on back. Now, because of the nature of this thing, it's often like an iceberg. When you start writing these things down, it's like the tip of the iceberg, and there's, 90% of it is still below the surface. If you feel that, if you're like, oh my God, this is really giving me visibility on the factors that are all stacked up, making me feel like I don't have power, agency, influence, I would invite you to continue this exercise later today and throughout this weekend. Just go ahead and keep writing those things down. Like anytime you have a thought that comes in and you're like, oh, ugh, that feels terrible. Ask yourself to identify what it is. What am I thinking here? What truth am I telling myself that may or may not be true? And then go, is this something within my arm's reach or is it something outside of my influence? And write it into those circles. This begins this process of creating actual visibility, and then you get to take your captain's chair back of being in control or the active agent in your own life. I would love to, Leslie says this is relates to my tired list. Yes, that's exactly what I was hoping it would. Like take everything on your tired list, and I invite you to continue writing that down. Once you begin turning your attention to it and giving a little bit of space for it, realizing it's not weakness, you're not going to wallow, you're not going to stay there forever. You actually let it have its voice. More and more of that information will come up as you allow yourself to pay attention to it. As you do that, and then begin to assign it to its proper space. Like this is inside my influence, and this isn't, something begins to shift. Who wants to use the raise hand feature and share a bit? Somebody who, as you're doing this, you're having this like aha, like this pop of awareness about something. Who wants to use the raise hand feature and share a bit? We'll do one or two of these and then continue on. Teresa, yes.
So one of the things that I've had to do since I've had my accident in December is really pull in on myself.
Mhm.
I almost feel like I'm in a tunnel looking out. And so one of the things that have been coming up to me is that I have to let a lot of the stuff go that's out there, because I was really concentrating on it and I was really getting stressed and I was really going crazy about it. And I realized that wouldn't heal, and I wouldn't be able to heal if I let all that stuff come in here. And so I've had to really make my focus. And during that, I realized that I can only look at what I can do for something. And if there's nothing that I can do, I have to let it go.
Give
So
us a little back. Most of us here know, but give us a little background. What was the accident you had?
I was at a stop sign or a stoplight, and I was rear-ended by a pickup truck going 40 miles an hour. And I have concussion history, and it gave me another concussion. So I have not been able to work since December. So I've been going heavily through all kinds of therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy, mental health therapy, um, all that kind of stuff. And so everything just kind of collapsed in on me.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting because in a way it's been a blessing in disguise, although it doesn't seem like that at times, you
Mhm.
know. But it's like everything collapsed and I had to really start paying attention to me. And then that's when I realized that I have to let all this other stuff go and then look to see if there's anything I can do about it. And if there's not, I mean, there's still stuff that will stress me out when I read something. I'm like, good grief, you know. But then I have to come in and like, okay, is there anything I can do with that? And if there's not, I've let it go. And I've been finding that I have been um, intuitively realizing that I think the only way we're ever going to heal the world is if we heal ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Teresa. I so appreciate that you raised your hand and shared that, because you had that experience of being rear-ended. Uh, I think we can all agree you did not cause that.
No.
This came into your life, and you had just started a new job. You had just, there was all
Mhm.
this. So this big experience came into your life, and I just really appreciate you being willing to share with us, because how many of you, whether it was a car wreck or some other version of that, have had things come into your life in the last year or two that you had very little control over and that caused a lot of havoc in some way? Yeah.
Yeah. And this one like really turned it upside down. I mean, I had to relocate, had to sell my house. I am unable to work right now. So I have
Wow.
no income coming in because I don't have any income coming in. I didn't have a car. So my aunt and uncle came through. I mean, and I've had such a good support group. I mean, I'm living with friends who, as soon as they found out what was going on, they're like, you're coming and living with us. And I've been just so, so grateful for all of that. And
Mm,
so another thing is it's given me a look and an outlook that there's a lot of people who wouldn't have had my group support around me like I have. And so it also helps me look at other people and their situation a little bit differently too.
agreed. No, I love that. Teresa, thank you so much. Yeah, I can really feel like how much you've connected with all of us. If you can see yourself in some way in Teresa's situation, just use the chat. I see a bunch of notes coming in here. No, I just love that, Teresa, that you're willing to share it, because again, it's something that turns your life upside down.
Yeah, it totally
Yeah,
did.
yeah,
I mean, it was just completely life changing. And that's the other thing is I could be completely bitter, and I can't say that there aren't some days that I've had like, oh crap, why did this happen to me type of thing. But at the
sure.
same time, I've really, really, and I've really tried to express the gratefulness to everybody for everything that everybody's done for me, because I feel like I'm just really blessed that way. And I have the support I've had for so many people have just been tremendous. And there's a lot of homeless people that hang around this neighborhood. And I really think about what was their situation? And it could have easily been mine, you know? And
Yeah,
so all of this stuff has had to make me come in, and sometimes I almost feel like I'm selfish. Uh, but at the same time, I also feel like maybe I'm not, because I feel like um, people get energized when they're around me, because I've had people tell me that my energy has been good, and they feel like um, their day changes. I mean, I've had complete strangers like just be grouchy or anything, and I just give them a smile, and all of a sudden I get this really big smile back. So
I love that. Thank you so much, Teresa.
you're welcome.
Yeah. Also, Teresa mentioned something that's such a key part of developing resilience, and that is connections with others. In our culture, we have a lot of the ethos of the lone wolf, of the put it on a pedestal to be all sufficient. We feel embarrassed if we need to ask for help. We feel embarrassed to even admit that we might need help, right? So we have these miniature castles that we call our homes, and a lot of us, to quote, I think it was Thoreau, most men lead lives of quiet desperation. A lot of people are in quiet desperation, not feeling like they have the help or the resources they really need. And so, Teresa, when you shared that, just reminded me, so crucial for us to actually be willing to let our roots touch other people's roots. Let us support each other. I need to get to Leslie here. Did you have one last thing, Teresa?
I was just going to say that I think it's really going to be important as we move on with everything
Yes.
that's going on in the world.
It's crucial, and I'm so glad you brought it up, because I think that's one thing we often forget. I mean, we're doing it right now. We're doing it right now. But Maria says many people are afraid to be vulnerable. We're doing that right now. This is not some other time. And thank you for helping me do what's actually needed. All right, Leslie.
Oh, hey. So, Teresa, you brought up something for me, bitterness, that is a high high on my list
Mm,
because that goes with the frustration and the anger. And then
mm,
I go, slip slide, and I've had to learn how to get out of that. But what I wanted to really bring up that I connect to is that what happens in our mind, everything we're dealing with today, our tiredness, our what's in our arm's reach, is how it affects our body. And that was goes back to the early morning, an hour ago when you talked about it, and
mhm.
what is what are we physically feeling? And
Yeah.
without telling you my story, because it's unimportant, it's out of my control. And the
Mhm.
anger and the bitterness came March 1st, and
Yeah.
it attacked my left hip. And I finally released it, but it took 3 weeks. But
Yeah.
being able to connect to it. So I think that's really important. And I
Mm.
think, Teresa, you're a light worker. And I think that's why people respond to you this way in my feelings. And I've been seeing you now for almost 2 years, through the two groups. And if we can all connect from our brain to our body and understand that all
Mhm.
this that we're talking about affects us
Yeah.
internally,
Yeah.
as it does your partners, your husbands, wives, whoever.
Mhm.
So I have noticed that, and I can get out of it quicker now. So
Yeah.
that's the important thing, is how quickly, once it attacked me and I woke up, I went, oh, F.
Mhm. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
and then I was like, all right, now I have to
Yeah.
unwind this. So I didn't work out for a week. I didn't do
Yeah.
what I normally do, and it threw me off course, but then I had to rewrite myself. So that's
Yeah.
really,
Leslie, thank you so much for that. And I love that you just brought up how quickly can I get out of this? Like often these things when they show up in our lives, especially if they stack up and we just have that overwhelming sense of weariness or inability to affect change or anything, we begin telling that story, and that becomes that downward cycle, that vicious cycle we're talking about. And I want to make very clear. Sometimes in these settings, we can begin to internalize the idea that I'm weak, I'm lazy, I'm something because I've been caught in a spiral. The fact is, we're simply bringing things into awareness, into consciousness, and then we're using some tools that we're sharing this weekend to be able to know how to step into a different space, to know how to affect our own consciousness. All right, Deborah just joined us. Deborah, hello. All right, I'm gonna share a couple more visuals, and then we're gonna move into a bit of a other space. All right, so we did this work of identifying the things that are affecting our consciousness, our state of being. And then we're separating them, we're sorting them out, saying this is within my arm's reach, it's inside of my influence, or it's outside of my influence. And we're now beginning to ask ourselves, how can I allocate more or most of my resources to the things within my arm's reach? I want to share this with you. It came to me back in 2008, 9. My life, many of you know, got turned upside down during the mortgage meltdown. Lost a house, lost all the things that I thought mattered, moved with my then wife and kids to Austin, Texas. And of course, what I just said that I thought mattered, and then I moved with my then wife and kids. I learned during that time that no matter what else I lost, the people in my life were within my arm's reach. They mattered deeply, right? The money, all those things, the credit score, all the things that I had built and thought mattered so much and it felt so devastating to have taken away. When I was able to look at what's within my arm's reach, this actually returned me into a state of greater ability to choose, greater ability to connect, to love, and also to create. Because I had been so focused on the external forces that felt like were so overwhelming and taking everything that mattered from me. As I began to return that focus back to what I could control, not control, but influence. And by the way, that there's such a subtle difference between those words, control and influence. I think I talked about that earlier. But the more that we can go, I really can't control anything, but I can influence. I have influence over my health. I have influence over my mental health. I can affect what I put into my body, what I think about, what I put into my mind, how I move myself. These are things over which we do have influence. You can do all the right things and still get cancer, so we don't have total control, but we have influence over it. And as we exert what we do, influence over the things we do have influence over, it increases our sense of efficacy, of the ability to change things, of the ability to create what matters to us. All right, let's just take a quick look at the nervous system chart here. By the way, I will drop a link to the handout that includes these things in just a moment here. most of you are familiar with this. It's the polyvagal chart. This actually maps what's going on inside of our mind and nervous system and the neurochemicals that are being released and how it's affecting our physiology when we get up into fight or flight, into freeze, right? Um, I love to look at the bottom end of this, the ventral vagal zone, as it's the holy grail of psychology, of spirituality, of self-help, of all the things, right? It's like if we can get ourselves into this space, this is what it's the goal of all of these other practices really is to move us into this space when we discover that it's a nervous system state, right? That we actually can affect change and move into that state more often. um, we discover that we aren't as much at the mercy of external forces. Now, I said as much at the mercy. None of us is wearing impregnable armor. All of us experience things that hit us and spike our anxiety, our anger, our fear, all those things. Um, on your own time later, because I know that we're running through our time here pretty quickly, what I would love though is for you to actually look at the handout. I have this chart and look at what it's doing inside of your brain, inside of your body. So when you're in the parasympathetic nervous system, we get into this state of freeze, right? And we begin to shut down. We begin to no longer see possibility. We see only limitations, only things that are making us afraid. So we begin to shut down. This is analogous to, if you watch Nature Channel, this is analogous to the leopard or cheetah that's running after a gazelle, reaches up, leaps up and grabs it by the throat. Up until that point, the gazelle has been in fight or flight. It knows it can do something. You see this dotted line here that says, I can and I can't. Once we cross the line, we pop over into that, oh, there's nothing I can do about this. Like the minute that the cheetah or whatever grabs the gazelle by the throat, often that creature goes limp. Have you ever noticed that? It just goes limp. Well, and that's the body's way of saying, if this is now beyond hope, there's nothing I can do about this, then I'm just going to go limp, right? Well, the trouble with us humans is we have this prefrontal cortex and we tell stories about things. We often put ourselves into a state of, there's nothing I can do about this, and then we go limp, right? That's a very natural experience. And this is why we're doing this program this weekend, is to go, you don't have to go limp. We can actually move ourselves back into the state of, uh, let's look at the green zone here, joy in the present, groundedness, curiosity and openness. We have connection. We feel safe and feel oriented to our environment. In other words, this is the most sane mental physiological state for us to be in. And by the way, one of the reasons I wanted to do this program is to invite more of us into our genuine sanity that exists within us at all times. No matter how you're feeling, no matter what's going on out in the world, there is a space inside of you, and you can find it, that allows you to retreat into sanity, that allows you to actually create a bit more health inside of yourself. Many of you have heard me say this, but if you can imagine that each of us is cells in the collective body, you're a cell, I'm a cell. So there's all these other cells. We are just one cell, tiny in the collective body. But when you bring yourself into greater health, you actually begin to spread health to the cells around you. When you bring yourself into health, you spread health to the cells around you. By bringing yourself into a more resourceful inner state, a more peaceful inner state, you actually begin to radiate those things to the cells around you. Whether or not you put on a program like this or stand on the street corner and tell everyone to be peaceful or whatever. I was sharing with the CEO of Daily Om the other day. We were talking about programs we're putting on. And I said, Todd, I said, sometimes I feel like I'm standing by the side of the freeway and all the cars are driving on this freeway at 90 miles an hour and they're all on fire. And I'm waving my arms by the side of the freeway saying, hey, y'all, you should pull over and meditate with me. They're like, are you crazy? Because it doesn't feel like enough. It doesn't feel like enough to create some moments of clarity and calm. It feels like, how does that change the world? The fact is that a healthy cell radiates health and has more positive energy than a disease cell has of negative energy. So by bringing yourself into your greater peace, your greater sanity, your greater joy, by bringing yourself into that, you actually are affecting the whole in a positive way, whether or not you open your mouth to even talk about it. All right, let's look back at this just for a moment. What's within your arm's reach and what's outside of it. Just notice when you glance at the items you identified what's inside my arm's reach, what's outside of it. When you glance at the things that are outside of your arm's reach, notice what it does in your nervous system, right? If I open threads and start scrolling and I see news that feels distressing to me, or people yelling about the news that feels distressing to me, I can notice how it spikes my anxiety, how it puts me up into fight or flight, how it puts me into a mental state of, oh my God, nothing I can do, nothing anyone can do can ever change this, blah, 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 blah. All those stories, right? And by the way, when I say blah 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 blah, I'm not being dismissive. I'm reflecting that that's how it sounds inside of my head because it's just a constant, never-ending, recurring cycle of ideas, of beliefs, right? And that creates imagination. The imagination creates feelings. It becomes this reinforcing cycle. So what I want you to be able to do using today's session and the other sessions of this series is begin to go, oh, wait a minute, I actually have the power to remove myself or allocate less of my attention, less of my focus to the things I know I can't control, the things I know I can't influence, right? So as we begin to turn our attention back inward, back within our arm's reach, I would love for you to begin making some notes on this, and I would like to invite you to do this throughout this weekend. Maybe take some time away from social media or other news and actually just develop this further on your own. What, how many different things can you put within your arm's reach? And I'm not talking about trying to create an enormous, overwhelming burden of tasks for yourself, but just begin to notice the places you've been neglecting that are within your arm's reach. Is there a small garden on your back porch that you'd like to plant? Is there a dear friend you'd like to refresh a relationship with? Does your mother need a phone call? Oh, what about yourself? You're within your arm's reach. Do you need to take a walk today? Do you need to give yourself a break and just read a good book? Susan was talking about that earlier. What is it that you can do within your arm's reach? And just notice how you feel when you begin to reassign this. You push the things that aren't within your arm's reach, you push it out of that circle, and emphasize, you focus on the things that you can do something about. Notice how that feels. Can you notice how a little sprout of possibility begins to spring up when you place your focus there? Just a little bit of possibility. Yeah. Oh, I didn't realize that was the last slide. How about that? Um, we've been talking about and looking at these things. I just love to be able to share with you. My God, I can't believe we're already only about 15 minutes left here. Um, Go ahead and just use chat for a moment since we won't have a time to do a lot of voice sharing right this minute. Um, what ahas, what ideas, maybe just even what are things that you hadn't thought of that should be within your arm's reach that you've been maybe ignoring or pushing out because everything just feels so overwhelming? What are some things that you're noticing that are within your sphere of influence, within your arm's reach? And how does it feel to focus on those things rather than on the things you cannot influence? How does that feel? Use chat for a moment. How does it feel? Free. Says Deborah. Empowering. Hopeful. Loving myself more and letting go. I love that. Feels like active coping. Yes. What a great phrase, Alice. I can breathe. Yeah. Calming. A bit of relief. Liberating. Wonderful. Session has helped me so much. Isolated from my tribe. The thoughts have been coming to me through this healing journey of being reaffirmed. Oh, I love that. I really love that. All right. So I'm going to drop a link to a PDF. We'll also share it during later sessions, but I would invite you to click on this and download it. You don't have to spend time with it right this minute. Setting limits on relationships with a friend may not mean leaving, but simply setting loving boundaries. I love that, Joanne. Right. And again, when we begin to reallocate our resources, which include our attention, our time, right, and our emotions, when we begin reallocating those resources into the things we can influence, you will notice this. And it's very much like simple daily practices such as making your bed, right? Um, you're going to notice a greater sense of agency. You're going to notice that you have a little more power. And by the way, when you do something, when you take a step in the direction of something you truly want to um, influence or create, when you take a step in that direction, that brings you into line with the rest of your creative ability, with your ability to create for yourself what you truly desire. I'm going to show you a couple things on this handout, and then we're going to have a meditation together. All right, so I did some of the basics here. One thing we didn't talk about a lot was I have this. So, suggested daily resilience practices. I recommend that you join me in making a personal rule for yourself that you don't check into any news or social media for at least 1 hour after waking. Give yourself 1 hour. Now, I'm not saying don't do it at all. I think we all tend to, for the most part, one way or the other. But give your brain and nervous system a chance to wake up, to come into your day in a more resourceful frame of mind where you're not feeling like you're being chased by vultures or wolves or whatever. I recommend making your bed, right? And this is something that I've made a practice of even when I was going through real depression, feeling like nothing mattered. I would just notice if I get up and make my bed, that sends a signal to my psyche. I am an active agent in my life. Also, drink water. Susan's going to be talking to us about some of these things again later today. I also want to invite you to use the creative self-journaling practice. Many of you already have this, but it's a very, very simple process for journaling. And ask 3 questions. How do I feel right now? What do I need right now? And what would I love to create? Or sometimes that third question is, how would I love to feel right now? I also have an audio version of it here. This is all free. You don't even have to enter your name and email. This is the actual page where you can go and download it. I also have a guided visualization, and this is where you are retraining your imagination to be able to create scenes that create safety, ease, all the good things, all the space, right? We actually have to learn how to retrain our imagination. So I wanted to share that with you. These things are all in that handout. Let's see what else is coming up here. Remaking bed. Well, maybe after the hubby gets up. Sandra, thank you for sending me that chart. I will look at it later. Really appreciate that. All right. What I want to do right now is something I usually do at the beginning of these sessions, which is we're going to have a small ritual for the next few minutes. We're going to have a small ritual. I love to use, as Carl Jung says, modern humans are craving, we crave meaningful ritual. You know, many of us don't go to church anymore or some of the other rituals that used to be part of our lives. But we often feel cut off from meaningful rituals. So for me, you can develop and create meaning in any ritual that you want to do, whether it's making a cup of coffee or tea or doing what we're getting ready to do right now. I love to light a candle because it's actually a signal that I'm sending my psyche that I'm entering a slightly different um, state of awareness. It allows me to show up, to arrive, right? So I'm going to light a candle. I invite you to develop your own, as we talked about the recipe book earlier, I'd invite you to develop your own ritual. What is something that is mundane in your life, but it's something you do every day, and by bringing attention and intention to it, you can actually create a meaningful moment. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to require special equipment or knowledge. What is it you can just simply by slowing down? I used to work in the cigar lounge in Austin, Texas, and again, this was when I was, really going through all this turmoil. And I was working the cigar lounge, and so I would make coffee and tea and pour beer and wine for these guys. And I remember feeling so fraught during that time. It's like, this isn't making me enough money. What am I doing? Oh my God, I'm wasting my life. And then I remembered I can bring my whole self to each of these tasks. And I would pretend as if I could pour love and positive energy into every cup or pot of tea I was making or whatever it was I was doing. I was like, and that was for me, that was creating a meaningful ritual out of mundane tasks. And it brought meaning to it. It made me feel like I was on purpose in some small way, right? So I just want you to think about what are things I'm doing throughout my day where I can bring my whole self to it in a new way. Because that reminds you that who you really are matters, that who you really are is effective, that who you really are is the most important thing, really. It's not your bank account. It's not who's winning the politics. It's not any of these things. It's you coming back truly into yourself, right? So let's go ahead. First of all, I want you to glance at your list of things that make you tired, the things that are outside of your control. I want you to glance at that list and let yourself go ahead and feel that for a moment. Let yourself feel the spike of whatever it is, overwhelm, anger, irritation, exhaustion, whatever it is that comes up for you. Just go ahead and let yourself feel it. We're not going to hide from it. You see it? Let yourself go into that state a little bit. Oh my God, whenever I see that person's name on the news, it just makes me, whatever it is. Whenever I think of my kid who's going through these struggles and there's nothing I can do about it, it makes me feel so whatever it might be. Let yourself go ahead and feel that. Now, what I want you to do is take a long, deep breath with me. Maybe stretch your arms out wide. This reminds us that we are within. We are the center of our own arm's reach. Take a long, deep breath and let it out. When you're ready, allow your eyelids to just close or lower a bit. Let your gaze turn inward and take a long breath and let it out. And now I want you to imagine you just looked at one of those items on your list and you can feel the contraction, you can feel the fear, the anger, whatever that feeling is. And I want you to actually squeeze your body as hard as you can, all of your muscles, your legs, your shoulders, your neck, your eyes, your ears, if you can clench them, all of these, just clench it as hard as you can. Hold it for 10 seconds. 9, 8, don't breathe very much. 7, 6, 5, squeeze harder. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, now take a deep breath and slowly let your breath out. Can you feel the cascade of relief, of tension? Can you feel how good it feels to give yourself this relaxation? Now I want you just to take a breath in without contracting. Take a nice long breath in. Hold it at the top. And as you release, I want you to imagine you can let your earlobes and your eyebrows and your neck muscles and your shoulders drop. Let's do that another once or twice. Nice deep breath in and let it out with a sigh. And one more time. Notice that by simply choosing to breathe differently, by choosing to relax your body, notice that as you breathe in this way, you're giving yourself a gift. You're coming into the core of who you really are. You're finding your own center. You're finding the ground of your being. And this is where you have direct influence. This is where you are the creator of your experience. You are the effective agent. And now I want you to just, with your eyes closed or lowered, just imagine you can notice the other presences around you, those of us who have gathered for this. And if you're catching this by replay, you're in this circle with us. Imagine you can see all of us sort of like we're sitting in a large circle in a field under the starry night. And imagine that you can glance around and notice that there's this glow of energy happening within each of the people who have joined our circle here. There's this glow of energy, and it seems to be very positive. It seems to be as if each one in this circle is being empowered. They're taking their power back. Can you notice that? And then as you breathe, take a nice long breath in and imagine it's creating that light inside you and making it even brighter. And as you release, notice that you're able to exchange and share that energy with those near you. Notice that you're actually connected to others who care about this world, who care about life, who care about making a difference, who care about being in healing, who care about adding to the really positive chorus that's needed right now. How does that feel to know that you are not alone, but you're connected? Not only you're not alone and you are connected, but you're able to actually serve and exchange with others just by being who you are, just by breathing, just by showing up. Notice how that feels. And as you sit there, just notice how you are supported in the chair. But if you can imagine that you're supported by the earth itself, and as you breathe, imagine you're growing roots deeper into the good earth. You're able to breathe, you're able to open up, you're able to receive what you need, you're able to find the resources, that the deep intelligence, the genius of your life force, of what brought you here as a spark, has never left you. It's always been here, and it is here to guide you through the rest of your life. Just feel that. And as you go back to your life today, as you return to a later session today or tomorrow, I want you to carry this spark with you. I want you to carry this knowing that you matter, that you have the deep wisdom, that you have the code within you that spells out the perfect life that you're meant to live, the life that you're meant to create, the contributions you're meant to offer this world. And remembering that the greatest contribution you can ever make, the greatest creative project you will ever embark upon is becoming yourself, is discovering who you are, is accepting that beautiful, bumpy, magnificent creature, and then expressing from that place. Let's take a nice long deep breath. Reach your arms out wide and then reach around yourself and give yourself a really big hug. We're going to do that for 10 seconds. Just hug yourself. Maybe put your hand on the back of your neck or head, like someone who would give you a hug, who really loves you. And let it out. I love seeing the glow of energy on all your faces. Thank you all so much for joining me for this. I know a couple of you have had to bounce out, and I just want to thank you. Those who were able to join us for this live session, your presence has mattered. It really makes a difference. We have about 2 minutes. We have time for like one. Does anyone want to raise a hand and talk about how you feel differently in some way? By the way, it does not need to be a compliment. If you feel like, man, I feel much more anxious and worried now, that's okay. Who wants to raise your hand and share just for a minute? I'm looking at your comments. Thank you. Timely and true. Thank you. Oh, I'm so glad this has made a difference for you. I love that. I'm really looking forward to Susan's session that comes up in about an hour and a half from now. We're going to be talking about very practical things like sleep and some herbs. Some herbs. And by the way, I have experienced these things from Susan, and it's made a really profound difference in my life. So I invite you to join us back here in about an hour and a half. Thank you so much for your feedback. I'm so glad this has been useful to you. And you all, just imagine that you can take this awareness, that you can create space between stimulus and response, that you can create that sanity, that you can take that into distressing conversations or just taking it out with you in the world, that energy. You can take that sanity with you and imagine that even though it might not seem like enough, that you are actually adding to the sanity that this world needs. Thank you for being here. I love you all so much. Will you have upcoming workshops, says Alice? Yes, I will. And if you're on our list, you'll know about them. I really am so glad you all been here with me. Thank you for your comments and come back in an hour and a half so we can meet with Susan. Thanks for being here, y'all. See you soon. Bye.